Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to the Bendigo Tech School. Let me just check that everything is on. I'm going to take this stream off, and I'll go to big head mode. Hello. Wow, my hair is frizzy today. Welcome to the Bendigo Tech School's live streaming sessions. Today we are talking about Adobe Illustrator, and I'm just looking at my stats. I think we have the most people we've ever had for a session all at once, which is good. Makes me feel popular. So I'll get right into it in a second, but I'll do the usual spiel that I've been doing for our live streams to make sure everybody is all on the same page. We're running these through YouTube live streaming, obviously. Now, there is about a 20-second delay between me talking and what you see, and basically my feedback I get from you. So just bear that in mind. If you have any questions, please use the chat on the right. If you can't use the chat, you generally you do need to log in with a Google account to use the chat. So let me know how you go there. And that's about it. If I have any issues, if my audio drops out, any of those kind of things, please let me know, because I generally won't know. I'll check chat every now and then, and I'll also check my stream to make sure it's going okay. Bandwidth-wise, YouTube has been pretty good recently. I'm looking back at my playback, and it seemed to be, yeah, it's pretty good. I'm seeing my giant head there. So our resolution is okay, but again, if that drops, let me know, and I can make some changes on my end. What else do I need to say? I think that's it. We'll get started in a second. I'm going to switch across to this view over here. There we go. Another thing I should add as well, we've got a week's worth of classes of all of next week. But after that, we do really want people to fill out the... I can't hear very well. Volume is on max, but it's quite faint. Let me just hear back my playback for you. Thank you for letting me know, Mim. I'm just going to check it back on my end to make sure changes on my end. What else do I need to say? I'm just going to pause that. I'm coming through pretty clear. So what I might do, I'll pump the volume up on my mic, but hopefully that doesn't blow anyone else out. Mim, let me give that a go. If anyone else is having issues with hearing me, please let me know. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. I'm just going to turn that up a little bit. All right, so let me know how that goes. That's pretty loud now. I don't want to have it too loud. I'll talk louder. That's okay. So I'm going to talk louder. Let's just do that. So hopefully everyone can hear me now. If it's too loud, you can turn it down, I guess. So that's all right. So let me know, Mim, if that's any better. I'm even going to move my mic a bit closer. So many cables. All right, I'm going to move my mic quite a lot closer. All right, it's right near me now. So hopefully we're okay. I've increased the quality of that mic as well. And let me just go into my mic settings just to make sure everything is good, because I want to make sure people can hear me, because I think I'm important. I'm not. All right, so let me go to my mic. Okay, it's pretty loud. I'm just going to go back in. I'm just going to make a couple of changes to my Rode mic. Hold on. Okay, we're doing all right there. Let me just check down here. Okay. And my input seems pretty good. All right. Just want to go in there. Cool. All right. Well, that's probably the best I can do on my end. So hopefully you're okay, Mim. Hopefully that's coming through nice and clear for you now. But again, let me know if you have any issues. All right. So I'm gonna get started. What I was saying, sorry, was that starting. There we go. Thanks. Awesome. Cool. So I'll do that as well. I'll have my mic nice and close. It's a very nice microphone. So what we're doing next week is, after this week's of sessions, we are going to change the way we do things a little bit, just to hopefully encourage people to fill out our surveys, mainly because they really help with our numbers. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to have our videos be live for people that book in, and they can watch them while we go. And for people that maybe don't do that, they can catch them a little bit, like about a week later. So it's kind of like a bit of a subscribe and get our content early kind of thing, which will help us out. So hopefully that will help us out. And I believe there may be giveaways after next week's sessions as well. So that would be good to tune in. I feel like a disc jockey. All right, so let's get started. Enough talking. So today we are talking about Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator is a program we're looking at in this Masterclass series. So this is going to go for 3 sessions. We've got our beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Now, think of it like if you do today's session, you'll definitely be able to do the following weeks, and you should definitely be able to do the last week's session. And the goal of these sessions is to actually produce a bit of content that we're going to make. So as opposed to using Illustrator to design, what have I got? Some stuff I've been working on to design some like a an image or something like that, we're going to use Illustrator to actually create a piece of subtractive manufacturing. So what I mean by that is we're going to design something that we can actually cut out on our laser cutter back at the tech school. That's going to be the plan for these sessions. So after these 3 sessions, you will have a design that you can cut out and you can produce and make at the tech school. Now, obviously, the tech school is shut for people to come in. But, you know, Graham's there every now and then. Maybe we can can't get him to make some of your things for you and send them your way. So we'll get started. So in terms of what we're looking at, because this is a beginning session, we'll talk about I'm going to actually talk about 2 programs. I'm going to talk about Illustrator, and I'm also going to talk about Photoshop, which I have over here, and some cats, obviously, from the last session that we had. Now, there is a big difference between the 2. Okay, so I guess to put it side by side, we have Photoshop, which is a photo editing program, and then we have Illustrator, which is a vector-based program. So they both have 2 different, I guess, use cases. So with Photoshop, what you're doing is you're editing a photo that you've already got. So you're making changes to some content that you already have. You can create new content in Photoshop, but really that's not what its goal is. It's to edit photos, to make changes to existing images. Okay? Whereas Illustrator is for creating content from scratch. That's really what it's for. And it uses vectors, whereas Photoshop uses pixels. So I'm going to explain that, of course, with a cat. So let me go into Photoshop. I'm going to start in Photoshop. I'm just going to create a new document. So don't stress about Photoshop at the moment. We are going to have some video sessions on Photoshop a little bit later, but I'm just going to jump into Photoshop and I'm going to go into print and A4 and cat here. All right, and I'm just going to move my laptop out of the way. I'm running on a couple of screens here. And I'm just going to keep zooming into this little guy here. All right, so the more I zoom in, there you go. So you can start to see this cat is made up of pixels, okay? Or DPI, so dots per inch. And every inch we have a certain amount of dots, or these little squares here, all right? If I zoom in more, I mean, that's the max I can zoom in now, you can see I've got every individual pixel there, all right? And I'm gonna zoom back out. So what that means is this cat or this image is made up of a certain amount of information, and that is it. We can't really add any more to it. So if I was to enlarge this cat, if I was to print this cat out on a banner, okay, you would start to see, and you can even see it here, you will start to see the pixels starting to come through. All right, because what we're doing is we're enlarging the information that's already there. We're basically making those little squares larger. It's not creating new content. So if I was to zoom, and actually I'm going to make this image bigger, I'm going to scale it up using Photoshop. I'm just going to scale him, actually I'll just do it uniformly. I'll scale him all the way up. All right, Photoshop will do some tricks to try and smooth it out, but if I hit enter on that, we're going to start to see it getting a bit blurry, all right? Information because it is pixels that are there. Okay, so that's kind of set in stone, right? We can't make this image any bigger than it is. So that's our pixels, all right, and that's our DPI. So now we've got that as a basis of understanding. Let's leave the cat there. And I'm going to jump into Illustrator and show you the biggest difference between the 2 here. Okay, so I'm going to create a new document. So this is the Illustrator interface. When you first turn on Illustrator, yours may look a little bit different to mine. I'm using Illustrator 2020, but you may be using Illustrator 2019, depending on what classroom situation you're in or what software you're using back at school or back at work. The versions are pretty similar. There's not a great difference between them. Newer versions generally just have newer tools that you can use, but I'm not going to go over any of those. I'm going to stick with the old tools that we're used to using that haven't changed in a pretty long time. So here is Illustrator. I'm going to hit create and I'm going to create a new document. So what you'll get to begin with is basically a whole set. These are sizes I've been using, but I'm just going to go into our presets. You'll get a whole set of preset sizes to begin with. Essentially, we're looking at mobile, web, print, and film and video as well. And what you're getting there is a different, if we go into say web, you're basically getting different dimensions. Okay, 1920 by 1080 pixels, 1280 by 1024. So it's giving you some preset pixels or dimensions that you'll be using in a lot of cases. Print's probably easier to explain. So if I show all presets here, so we have an A4 page size as a preset, or an A3 or a letter. Okay, so that's basically the size of the document that's ready to go. So it's giving you that as a preset. So you can choose one of those presets to start, or you can just create your own by changing the dimensions over here. Okay, you can choose points or you can choose centimeters, whatever works best for you, and then portrait or landscape orientation as well. So choose whatever size you want, because for the sake of what I'm going to show you today, it's not going to matter a great deal, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to hit on A4. It does give you a color mode down here if I go into advanced options, depending on what color you want to use. This is kind of more for printing purposes, but also for the sake of laser cutting. I know our laser cutter, our Trotec, uses RGB color, but that's more for printing down there. And then there is basically our resolution. So a 300 ppi or pixels per inch. What that's saying is what we're going to do here is going to be a really, really high res image. So when I actually print this out, okay, we're going to be looking at a really, really sharp image. I would probably drop that down if I was working into web to 72 ppi. So basically the resolution isn't as high because it's going to be on a screen. It's not going to be on paper, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to keep it nice and high. I'm just going to leave it on CMYK for now. And I'm going to do an A4 page and just hit create. All right. And so I'm going to explain kind of the whole process as I go. It's always easier than kind of just stopping and talking too much. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go in here and you can see my drawing tools are a little bit different from Photoshop. If I jump into Photoshop, you can see the tools here. Most of the Photoshop tools are all editing tools because that's what its purpose is. You know, we've got our paintbrush, we've got our eye picker, smudging, you know, we've got filtering tools, we've got healing tools, all for basically changing what's there. But in Illustrator, we have all creation tools. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a shape. One big tip here, you'll notice that every single one of these tools up here, if they have a little arrow in the bottom right corner, it means if you hold your mouse key down for a little bit, you've got more options to choose from. Okay, so with my square here, I'm going to hit a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. All right, and I'm just holding Shift to conform it, so that's why I have a perfect square, and I'm going to let it go. Okay, so there's my square. And I'm going to get to the cat in a second. There's my square there. And you can see when you create something in Illustrator, it gives you two color modes. You have a fill and you have a stroke. The stroke is the outline, okay, so the line around it. And the fill is the internal color. So I'm going to make that, just so you can see this nice and easy, I'm going to make the stroke red and I'm going to make the fill color, I'm going to make that green. Okay, there we go. So now you can see I have a red outline and a green box. And if I go over here, I can increase that stroke to a bigger number just to make it nice and clear. So there we go there. There's my shape. There's my stroke, my outline, and then there's my fill. All right. So let me explain how vectors work. So what I've done here is I've created a square. And in fact, I'll even create a circle just because. I'm going to make a circle over here. All right. And then just so you can see that you can actually create stuff from nothing, I'm going to get the pen tool and I'm going to draw a shape as well. I'm going to just draw... Let me just draw something pretty simple. All right, and then I'm just going to do some work, and I'll show you what I'm doing a little bit later. I'm just going to move that there, and I'm going to move that over there, and there we go. So I just kind of made a real basic shape. So what we have here is, if I zoom in, you're going to notice that there are no pixels here. Okay, there are no little squares of of dots that we saw in Photoshop, because what this is now a vector design. And to explain that, I'm going to break it down a little bit. So here's my square, and you can see it's actually made up of these 4 points called anchor points. Okay, so we have our path, which is that line running across there, and then we have our 4 anchor points. And so what's happening is this anchor point, okay, and this anchor point, if I hold it over there for a second, you can see it's got an X and a Y coordinate, okay? And they are the coordinates on my A4 page. So this at X and Y is at those coordinates, 439 and 534, okay? And then this guy over here is at different coordinates. And so what Illustrator is doing is it is going, well, there's an anchor there, and there's an anchor there, so I'm going to draw the path between them. And that's a straight line. That's nice and easy for it. So we have this straight line that's drawn between there, and there, and there, and now we have our square. And so if I go and move one of these anchor points, I'm going to move it over here, you can see I'm pointing on the screen, you can't see that. You can see that I'm changing where that is located in space. And if I let it go, now it's at a different X and Y point. So I've moved that anchor, and then this path has redrawn, okay? So now we can know that this anchor is here, and this anchor is here, so it's going to draw the path between those two, all right? I move it over here, it does the same thing. Now, this is one that's probably harder to explain these days than it was maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago when I was doing it, because computers are so fast. What's happening is this computer is calculating that path, and you can see it's drawing that path for me straight away. Okay, so it's automatically doing the maths and going, well, if that anchor point is there and that anchor point is over there, my path must be this way. It's doing it for me straight away. If we went back 20 years, this would probably take a lot longer, you know, as it calculates that line and then redraws it. Okay, but we don't have to deal with that anymore. So the reason why we don't have pixels and the reason why this is a better format for creating content is it is automatically like redrawing your shape every time, okay? Unlike Photoshop where you were stuck with what you had, you were stuck with this image, and if I enlarged it, it was just going to get worse and worse and worse. Whereas with Illustrator, if I enlarge this and I separate those points and put them in a different spot, it's just going to redraw the image for me. It's going to redraw my square. Now, I'm just using a square here as an example, but you can get super complex in Illustrator, and I might even show you some more complex images maybe in some later classes. You can get photoreal in Illustrator as well. So the reason why this is really good is obviously I can enlarge this or I can shrink this as much as I want. So if I go down here, I can scale this down to whatever size I want. Let's scale it down to teeny tiny, right? Or I can scale it up to as big as I want, all right? And it's always going to be absolutely perfect. It's never going to lose quality. So that's really good. That's an advantage over Photoshop. Your second advantage over something like Photoshop is if we go back to my little cat, if I was to want to print this cat, okay, I wanted to make this cat at a huge size, at a banner size, the information or the file size would be huge because it has to draw all those pixels, okay? All those pixels are embedded in that file. So the file is massive, okay? It's a huge file size to work with and it really slows your computer down. Whereas with Illustrator, there's barely any information here. We have a square, right? Or we have a circle, but we actually don't. All Illustrator has is a whole bunch of numbers. And when I load my Illustrator file, it's just reading all those numbers out and showing me the content. So the file size here is very, very small. We're talking about a couple of kilobytes for this file, as opposed to, megabytes and megabytes for an image version of this. It means I can email this file to anybody, and then they can scale it up to whatever size they want. They don't have to get me to recreate it for them. They can scale it to a massive size. And that way, they've always got the best quality they can work with. So to explain, let me switch across to, I'm just going to make sure everything's going okay over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my big head. And I'm just going to show you my phone. It's probably dangerous. All right, so let me get down here. Okay, so I'll just show you my phone, right? So what we have here is, you can see what's on my phone. You can see all my emails I haven't read. Sorry, Graham. So we can see all the icons that are on my phone, okay? Now, use your phone as an example as well. So all of those icons that are on my phone, they're all vectors, okay? So I use a phone to explain this because everyone's probably got one in front of them. So every single icon that's on my phone is a vector. It's been made probably in Illustrator. All right, and the reason why they're using vectors is because they'll scale down to that teeny tiny icon size perfectly. The quality will stay the same. And then if I was, say, putting that same icon on an iPad, which is a bigger icon size, it'll just scale up and it'll look exactly the same. If I put it on my computer, it'll scale up again. It'll look exactly the same. If I had it on my TV, okay, it will scale up. And so what we can do with this one icon is it can be scaled up and down to whatever size it needs to be. It's just the software saying that. So my software is saying for my phone, be this size. For my TV, be this size. And it's all doing that from the exact same one image. So I only ever have one image, okay? The file size is tiny, so that's really good for mobile devices, and I don't have to make multiple of them. If we were doing this in Photoshop and we were making icons, like a lot of people did, you would have to make different versions of that icon. You'd have to make a 10 by 10 version and a 20 by 20 version. So you'd have like 15 different versions of that icon in Photoshop, which we don't want to do. So Illustrator and Vector is really helpful for doing that, okay? File sizes are tiny and you can scale them up and scale them down, all based upon that. So I'll get back to me. All right, so that is the advantages of using our vector format here. So let me show you it in a slightly more complex way. I'll grab the circle. So same deal. The circle, if we have a look at our circle here, and I'm going to zoom in. Our circle is made of 4 anchor points again, okay? But now the difference is with these circle anchor points is we also have a handle. And what the handle is doing is it's controlling the path. So it's controlling the angle that the path is going on. So our anchor is here and our anchor is here, and our path is now curved around because of those two handles that are controlling that. I can actually control that by moving that handle. Okay, I can move it out, I can move it in. All right, so now I'm just basically, I'm bending that path as we go. I'm just gonna check chat and make sure everything is okay. I think we're all good. Awesome. So you can start to control those handles, okay, and create that kind of content. So again, perfect in quality, puny in file size, and we can scale that up as much as we want. Okay, and of course there is a lot more you can do with my real basic shapes here. I don't have to have them red and green. I can go in, I can put some gradient effects in there as well. Let's get a nicer gradient. All right, so something like this. I'll bring that stroke down a little bit. All right, I can control the fall off of that if I want to. I can get rid of that orange altogether. I can get rid of that one. All right, so now I'm starting to, this is actually really hard to do in Photoshop, right? To try and make this really nice gradient. But because I'm dealing with vectors again, okay, I'm dealing in digital information, I can just change this on the fly to whatever I want and get a nice kind of view. I can get rid of that. If I double click, I'm gonna actually add in, let's add in a point if I want to. I'm gonna add in a, what should we do? I might add in this point and I might make this point, I don't know, green. Okay, there we go. So now I'm starting to change that as well. So you can have a lot of control and a lot of power in Illustrator, which is why I use it for everything. I think it's awesome. Okay, so I'm just kind of scaling around. The other thing you'll notice I'm doing is you'll find that I'm moving around really quickly. That is something that you'll pick up the more you use Illustrator as all the shortcut keys, and they're quite similar across the board for any Adobe product. So I was just holding the space bar to get the hand up so I can move it around. Control plus and minus to zoom in and zoom out. You select V to select your object, A to select the internal parts of that object. Don't stress about knowing shortcut keys, you'll learn them over time. It just speeds up the process, so you're not having to move through the menu all the time. You're just, clicking those keys, and it's really, really quick to go through it. I guess the other thing I should mention as well with Illustrator, especially if it's the first time you're using it, is it's a program that is really, really quick to pick up and to use. And what I mean by that is we have students, year 7s that come in on, say, a Monday morning, and they've never used Illustrator before. And then by the time they leave in a Monday afternoon, they've pretty much mastered what they need to know. It may have taken them about 2 hours to make their box, but then a lot of students will then make that thing again, and it takes them 20 minutes. So what I'm saying is with Illustrator, it has a really, really fast, I guess, learning curve, because you're learning the controls really quickly. You're learning how it works. And the second you've got that, it's actually really quick to create content. So every time you use Illustrator, you'll get better and better at it. Okay, so that is our vectors. I'm just looking at the time. Excellent. Okay, so that's the whole concept of Illustrator. That's basically how it works. It's all about those vectors and drawing those points. So I'm going to use the cat again as an example, right? I'm going to delete all this stuff, and I'm going to see if I can bring my cat in. I'll still see if I've got it. There he is. Okay, so I've brought my cat. Now I've brought my cat into Illustrator. Now the reason why I've done that is I want to show you how you would actually make this cat. This cat itself was probably made in Illustrator as well. It probably was originally in a vector. So let me show you how you would make that cat. I'm going to cheat and trace the cat essentially, but I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to auto trace it. So what I'm going to do over here is, as I show you your panels, you have obviously this panel over here, which is all your tools. And then down here, you have your panel, which is all of the properties of whatever tool that you are using at the time. Now, I'll just show you how that works. So that is called your workspace. Okay. If your workspace looks different to mine, it's a matter of just changing the workspace setting up here. The reason why they have that is there are lots of workspaces, okay? What they do is they just change the tools and they move them around into a different spot to better suit the project you're working on. So for instance, if I was working on layout, like page layout, I'm going to select that one. You'll see it's changed the layout a bit. It's showing me all of my swatches now, my color guides. It's showing me a lot of text tools, okay? Basically, it's rearranged the workspace to suit that particular function. All those tabs and everything are always available. It's just moved them and made them easier for you to see. So if I go back to my window and my workspace and I go into, let's just say, typography, again, you can see it's changed a little bit to suit what you're working with. I work in Essentials Classic. It's just what I'm used to doing. And what that does is it kind of gives you the main functions of Illustrator that you're going to use all the time. So that's how I'm working. So if you want to have the same layout with me when you want to have a go at playing with Illustrator after this session, I'm using Essentials Classic. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump down here and I'm just going to go into Window and I'm going to open up my layers. So again, if there's something that you can't find, there's a tab or there's a set of controls you can't find, if you go into Window, you can go and turn those on. So I'm just looking for my layers. There they are down there. All right, I'm just going to create a new layer by hitting the plus button. So with layers is very much like Photoshop. So think of layers like a bunch of like transparent paper, okay? And every time I put another layer, that's going on top of the one below it. And if they're transparent, it means I can see what's below it as well. So I've just made a new layer and I've left my little cat there and I'm just going to lock it. Now remember, that cat is still an image. It's not a vector. It's just an image that I've put in here as a guide. Now in layer 2, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw this cat, okay? I'm going to use the pen tool, which is the tool that you use most often, okay? So I'm just going to hit P to bring my pen tool up, okay? And I'm going to quickly draw this cat and show you how we would make it in vector format, right? Again, I'm going to do this very fast. So I'm just going to tab there, click there, and it'll look weird to begin with, but trust me, it'll make some sense. All right, I'll just move over here. I'll go one there. All right, I'm going to do half the cat. I'm going to do half his head. Okay, there we go. There's my cat. Now, clearly that doesn't look very much like the cat. So then what we do is we start to control those anchors that we put in there. Okay, so I only put in a few anchors, which is all we need. In fact, I probably put in more than I need. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, if you again, remember if you hold that down there, you have a few options. All right, I'm going to do this anchor point tool here, or Shift C, and I'm going to start to just kind of change these a little bit. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to move that up. I'm going to grab that. You might even find that you've got too many. So in fact, I don't really want that anchor point there. I'm going to hit minus. I'm going to delete that anchor point. A to select again, and I'm going to kind of move that around. And to make this even easier for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that fill color, and I'm just going to increase the stroke. I'm just doing this so you can kind of see this a little bit better. Okay. So again, I'm going to go over here, Shift C. I'm just going to start to play around with this ear. All right, I'm going to change this. Change this one over here. Now, obviously, I'm just doing this pretty quickly, just for the sake of this explanation. I'm going to grab that handle. So you can grab individual handles as well, okay, and start to kind of move them around. All right, Shift C again to change that to my anchor tool. I'm just going to move all of these. I'm just kind of converting them into little things I can play a little bit more with. All right, that'll do. Now I'm going to hit the A button to select my individual items, and I'm just going to start to tweak these a little bit. All right, I'm going to change that. All right, so if I zoom up a bit, you can see I've got I don't really like that ear. It's a bit pointy, so I'm just going to change that a bit. And that one there means I can change the radius of that point. So there we go. I'm just going to move that down a little bit, change that handle. So this is what I mean, right? Like, this is pretty quick. If you were trying to draw this in Photoshop, you would probably be there for a while. There we go. So I'm kind of just got that there. A button again to select this. I'm going to select that individual handle. I'm just going to move that one there. You can move your anchors as well once they're done. That's fine. Oops. And this is one, Illustrator, if you haven't got one already, Illustrator, really, you do need a mouse for it. If you can do this with your touchpad or trackpad on your computer, you're better than me. I need to have a mouse. So if you haven't got a mouse, I would definitely invest in one, because a lot of it is just moving these points around. All right, so it's definitely mouse friendly. All right, so again, I'm just going to hurry and speed this up a little bit because we don't need to be here all day. Those points are quite sharp, so I'm just going to change my stroke to just kind of round them out a bit. There we go. Okay, so that'll do. Obviously, it's not perfect. I did it pretty fast. But if we zoom back out again, all right, what I might do is grab that fill color, and I'm just going to grab my eyedropper tool and pick that color there. There we go. Okay, so there is my cat, right? So I did a really quick job of that, but I basically just traced around, drew around that area, and then I used those control tools to start to create my line. Okay, so if I turn that off and on, you can see it there. Okay, so let me just do one more bit of this just to make it, I guess, make a little bit more sense. I'm just going to turn off that. I'm just going to grab that. So I'm going to select my V tool. Grab that. I'm just going to get rid of that V there. All right, so what I'm going to do, let me do the eye and the ear as well, just so we can kind of see how this works. So P, back to my pen tool. I'm going to draw another couple of points. Now, with something like this, I reckon I could do this in just those 4. And you'll notice that when I did the last point, it had a circle, which means it's going to connect it and make it into one whole shape. All right, so Shift C to change the handles, just to change the angle that it's going on. Again, you do this pretty fast, right? And then A button to select my handles and just kind of control that fall off a little bit. I've made the stroke really large, so you can obviously see what I'm doing. Okay. And that'll do there. And of course, I might want to change that anchor point. Move it around. All right, there's that. And now let's do the eye. Now the eye is pretty easy because it's some shape. So instead of me drawing those, I'm just going to use my ellipse tool, and I'm just going to draw one circle there. Excellent. All right, I'm going to copy Control C and Control V. I'm going to copy and paste that guy, and I'm going to move it right in the center. I'm going to hold Alt and then scale. Scale that up a little bit. All right, and move that over there, and I'll just quickly give that a blue color. So that was no stroke. And I'm just going to make it blue, or I could use the eyedropper if I want to and pick that blue. All right. And then I'm going to do the white part. And I'm just going to show you something else that I've just done there to make it, to see where that went. All right. So then with this one, you can see by default when you do a new shape, it kind of inherits the color or the settings that you had in the last one. All right, we'll do that. And that is obviously white. Okay, so now you'll notice that I did 3 parts of my eye there, but I can only see the white because that goes down to your layers again. Okay, so whenever I create anything new, it creates it on a layer above the previous one. So if I go in here to my cat and drop that down, you can see all of those layers and you can see the order that they're in. So my little black part is below the blue and below the white. So if I want to change that, if I just move this up and then move that up, now we have our layers going there. So that's on top, okay? So to fix that color up, let's just make that like that. And there's our blue. And we can have a look at our other cat there as well. Let's just zoom out a little bit. All right, so I've just been using vectors, obviously. Now, again, super fast, right? So I'm doing this really quick. But there is my cat eye, pretty much. Now, let me show you another trick. So you can see that that black eye is directly in the center of the blue. So if I can I could probably try and move that around, then I can get my center, which is great. But the other thing I could do is if I select 2 elements, what happens in this right-hand column over here? I'm just going to deselect that and show you. This will change, this properties section will change depending on what you have selected, because certain things become available when you do certain things. Let me show you how that makes sense. So if I select just my circle, it gives me the stroke, the fill, and I can change the shape and the dimensions of the circle. If I select 2, I now have a new option that's come up here called Pathfinder and Align, because now I have 2 objects. The Align tool comes up so I can align them. So for instance, I can select this one to make them centered there, and I can make this one to make them centered there. Okay, now that only appears because I had 2 items selected, because you can only align once you have 2 items selected. Okay, so there we go there. And then finally, let me just do a little white circle to make sure I have that little white circle bit. There we go. I'm just going to make that white. V button. I'm just going to move this. Just going to zoom in. Sorry, my screen's at a really, really high res, just so you can see what's going on. And there we go there. And then I'll zoom out. All right, so that was pretty quick, right? We better do the pink of this. I'm just going to select my eyedropper tool. There we go. And that had a stroke color as well. And the stroke color was that kind of brownie color, I guess you could call it. Oops. So let me just pick that. I'm just going to randomly pick it from here. I reckon that looks about right. You can use the eyedropper tool to get the exact color, but I'm just not going to stress too much. There we go. All right, so there's my cat. Let me just turn off that layer below it. So you're starting to see that kind of take shape. And again, I did this super fast, right? I'm just trying to make excuses for how bad it is. So let me just get that fill color as well. Now, if I hit the eyedropper tool and I select this there we go. That's the color I want. And I'm just going to give that stroke color as well. We'll make that about 1.5. And I'll change that to something that's more suitable. Something like that there. Okay. So there is my cat starting to take shape. Again, I'll just turn that one off. So it's starting to take shape there. All right. But the difference, of course, obviously, is this is all done in vectors. All right. So if I go and enlarge this cat, all right, or if I press the A tool, you can see each individual anchor point. There's not many. Okay. So that image was only made up with maybe 10, 12 of these anchor points. Okay. If I wanted to, I hit the V tool, I can then enlarge this to whatever size I want. And it's going to be perfect, okay? So when I'm looking at the time, we're doing okay. So that should hopefully give you enough of an idea of how Illustrator works, how vectors work, essentially. They're all about creating content from those anchor points, okay? And like I said, you can get really, really, really detailed in the work that you're doing just by putting in more shapes, putting in gradients, those kind of things. You can create a photoreal image, essentially. We'll worry about tomorrow. Okay, so let me do a couple more things in the last 10 minutes or so. What I'd like to do with the remaining 15 minutes that you'll have once I'm done here is jump into Illustrator and have a play with it. If you are a teacher from a DET school, I know I've said this a few times, you'll have access to the Creative Suite, so Illustrator, Photoshop, and the like. There is a link on the DET website where you put in your email address and you have access to that, to downloading that. If you are not a teacher and you're watching and you want to get a copy of Illustrator, they do have a trial. You just sign up with any email address, and I believe it's a 30-day trial. It's pretty generous, so you can try out the Creative Suite and see how you go. It's not limited in any way. It's a fully featured version of it. You just only have it for 30 days. So definitely have a play with it and see how you go. So let me just show you a few more things now to wrap up what we're doing here. Now that I think you've probably got the idea of how vectors work, I'm pretty sure you've got that from my hideous cat head here. But let me show you a couple of things so you can play with it a little bit more. All right, so obviously we've talked about our tools here, our selection tool and our direct selection tool. I'll explain that because it can be a confusing one. So our selection tool selects the main object. So I've selected that whole shape, okay? The direct selection tool, all right? And then within that, you have an add and delete anchor point. So plus button, I can add an extra point in here if I wanted to, and then I can kind of move it around. All right, minus, I can delete one of those anchor points. Okay, so that's how you create your shapes and your content. All right, this one over here is called a curvature tool. It's very similar to the pen tool, except you can see it automatically is doing that kind of those handles, right? It's making it curved already. So very similar tool, except it has that nice kind of, as you bend, you can see it's changing the path dependent on how you're moving that. So you use those two a lot. Type tool is pretty obvious. You can type. All right. Whenever you use type or fonts in Illustrator, they're all vector-based formats as well. So there's my font there. I can go in and change it. I can do whatever I want. I can also what's called create outlines. So here's my text options over here. If I right-click that and do create outlines, it's now actually turned those, if I do direct selection tool, you can see it's actually turned those into vectors, and there are the vector points as well. Now, the only reason you'd want to do that, yeah, it's buffering. Yeah, sorry about that. So that will probably be a YouTube thing at the moment. So what will happen is, because at this point in time, and what are we looking at, nearly 5 o'clock, a lot of people are streaming from everywhere. So YouTube are going to try and buffer or kind of cap some of the stream. So if it is buffering for you on your end, let me just check out how I'm working on my end just to make sure. All of next week. Yeah, see, I'm okay on my end. So it's really random depending on where you are in the world and how the bandwidth is. But trust me that what will happen is this is actually recording fine, okay? And the second I finish my live stream, it will be available for you to watch back anyway. So the actual playback of this after this session will be fine. But yeah, it's just a bandwidth thing, I'm afraid. And there's nothing I can do about it on my end. I have just checked. I'll just double check my connection. Let's have a look, and I'm just going to see if I've got... Yeah, so on my end, I'm just looking now, my stream is going out good. So I think it might be just bandwidth on the other end, I'm afraid. But that's okay. You'll be able to play it back and watch it back, hopefully, and not as... It's all good, yeah. Cool. So you'll probably get my whole conversation I had then. But basically, if you play this back a little bit later, you'll be okay. The other thing you can do as well, if you're just joining the stream now, is live streaming has what's called a DVR mode. So you can pause the live stream if you want to, have a coffee, do whatever. And when you come back, you can play it from where you left off. And the chat will be there as well. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, I'll head back to Illustrator. So what was I saying? So text, yes. So the only reason you'd want to create outlines on text and turn them into vectors, because when you do that, you can't edit the text anymore. I can't create new text, okay? The only reason you do that is if you were going to then send this vector document to someone else to maybe print and they don't have your font. By creating the outlines of that font, they'll be able to open it up and see it exactly how it is. Okay, so that's your font. What else do we have? A line tool, pretty, I guess, self-explanatory there. I can create a line, okay? By default, the line is just a line. There's no stroke. I can increase the stroke and put a stroke on it. Hold that down, and again, you've got lots of other tools here. The spiral tool is fun. Okay, so I don't know why I did a special effect. So you've got all those tools down there. You've got, obviously, your shape tools down here, okay? Your basic shapes, rectangle, ellipse are there. Polygon tool, so if I tap on the polygon tool and then tap anywhere in my workspace, it'll give me this point here. So I can choose to have as many sides as I want, and then it'll create that for me, okay? So by default, it could be on whatever size you had, but if you want to change that, just click and then change the amount of sides you want. So if I want a triangle, there we go there. And then I can start to make triangles. Okay, so that's that down there. Actually, I'll show you one other thing that everyone is always asking about. With the type tool, one thing that it can do really well is do type on a path. So let me show you what I'm going to do there. So if I hold that down there, you can see I've got a whole bunch of tool options here for type. I'm going to do type on path because this is my favorite thing and everyone always thinks it's really hard to do. I'm going to just draw a circle. I'm going to draw an ellipse. Okay. Then I'm going to click on that and I drag it to type on path. And then I'm going to select, see how I've selected that path? And there you go. How cool is that? I love it. So I like little things. So now what I can do is I can type perfectly along that path. It's the best. So even if you use Illustrator for that one function, it's really cool. And then you can also move your shape around if I want to. If I go in there and change that shape, change the shape. It changes the path. It's very cool. I can go back and I can move the path, so I can move Rafferty all the way around there. So there are a stack of little tricks that you'll figure out as you use Illustrator more often, but that is one that I discovered a while back, and it's the best. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of type tools there. I won't go into all those right now. Down here we have our pencil tool. Pencil is a kind of like a more of a freehand kind of drawing. Okay, so you can see it's actually just drawing it like an actual pencil would. It automatically, see how it curved it around there? So if I did that really rough drawing, it automatically tries and smooths out my curves. But that's there if you want to draw something. It's not the best. It hasn't got a great deal of control. Eraser will do that. It'll rub out sections of your work. And you'll notice when I rubbed out that part there, it redrew the lines where I kind of erased. Okay, so you've got that there as well. And then we have a bunch more tools here as well. I won't go into all of these. This is probably more in-depth stuff, but there's a bunch of other tools to play with there. Okay, cool. All right, let's do 5 more minutes and then we'll call it a day. All right, so I might lead into then what we're going to be looking at on our next session. So that was just creating content from scratch using vectors. Okay, so Illustrator using anchor points and paths to create your content. It's all vector based, which means it's just, locations in space or on your document. Now, the reason why that's also going to be handy, sorry, I've just realized how phallic my image is there. I'm just going to delete that. So the reason why we are using this and the reason why it's perfect for our laser cutters, which I guess is the end point of all of this, is that those vector points, those map coordinates, is how a machine like a laser cutter actually cuts out content. Okay, because what it's going to do is we're not going to send the laser cutter our cat here. Okay, we're not going to send him that shape and he sees a cat. What the laser cutter is going to see is all of these anchor points. All right, and then as the laser head moves, it's following the path. So that's why we need to use vectors for things like a laser cutter or a CNC machine, because it follows those paths. So what I'm going to do, let me just switch back to this line mode here. When I send this to my laser cutter, so if I want to cut out this cat, it's going to receive all these anchor points and locations. It's going to receive the data for the paths. It's going to receive the handles and how they're affecting the path. And then it's just the head of the laser cutter is going to follow that path and cut that out perfectly. Okay, so that's why we're using vector-based programs for subtractive manufacturing. So subtractive meaning we're putting material into a machine and we're cutting or taking stuff away from that machine to create the content. So that's kind of the end goal of this. That is why we're learning how to use vectors, because we're going to send this detail and this shape here to the laser cutter to cut out. I'm just seeing if I've got any stuff lying around. Cool, yeah. So here is let me just switch back here. I'm going to go back to big head mode. All right, so here is a little F that I cut out on the laser cutter, right? So what I did there, obviously, is I had an F in Illustrator, and I sent it that path, and it just kind of cut through that shape there. So that's where we're going to go. So I'm going to wrap up in a minute, and what we're going to be looking at tomorrow, sorry, it's not tomorrow, next week. Sorry, I'm in school mode at the moment. What we're going to be looking at next week is we're going to start to talk about how we can create some shapes for laser cutting, how we can start to create some actual content. Let me switch back across to here. How we can start to use what we know here and create content. And we're going to use that by creating a few shapes and then using another tool. Let me just do this really quickly. So this is kind of like a preview for next time. I'm going to show you how we use something like Pathfinder to create our shapes. So let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to make a circle and then I'm going to do another circle. Okay. And I have these two circles here. Now, if I was to send this information to the laser cutter, it would cut that circle and then cut that circle as well, and so it'll cut out of there as well. But if I wanted to make this be one shape, let's just say, I don't know, I want to build a snowman. We didn't need the singing. So I'm going to make a snowman. And we're going to go into depth of this on our next session, so I'm going to go pretty quickly. So say I wanted to cut that out of the laser cutter. I wanted to build my snowman. Let's do a snowman. Yay. If I sent this information to the laser cutter, it would receive these three separate circles. It would cut that circle, and cut that circle. So that's not what I want. Okay, so we're going to use a thing called Pathfinder next week, whereas if I select all those three elements, I'll just select these two, and I can do this. Boom, and it merges them together. And then I'll do this, and merge those together. Okay, so now we have one shape. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about in our next session, is how to use Pathfinder with our shapes to create some shapes. We're going to talk about how we can start to create some content for a laser cutter to actually cut out, and then we'll leave at the end of that session and you will start to design something. In our last session, we'll talk about actually getting that printed, and I'm going to talk about how we can get that final product that you've done, how laser cutters work, how advanced manufacturing and subtractive manufacturing machines work, and the settings you need to actually cut that out. So that's session 3. So that's everything. I think that's enough for today. I think I bombarded you with enough info. So please have a go at filling this out. Have a go at, using Illustrator and see how it goes. I'm going to get my survey because I'm going to plug that as well. So thank you for filling out the Eventbrite links if you did. The other thing that I'm going to do right now, if you could pretty please fill out this survey. It's super short. It's just it's just for us in terms of data. So I'm just going to quickly send you. I'm going to put a link in the chat on the side. Control C. I'm going to plonk that in here right now. Boom. So if you could all take 5 seconds to fill that out after this session as well, that would be super duper. But that's about it. Any questions that you may have of this session, just shoot an email to the Tech School. I'm sure it'll come to me, bendigotechschool@latrobe.victor.edu.au. But yeah, more than happy to answer any questions over the course of the next few days. Next week, again, I'll do my other plug. I'm just going to go across here, and I'm going to go... I don't know why I'm talking to myself. I just find I have to. It's really weird, this live streaming thing, when no one's here to kind of bounce off. I'm just talking to myself and people just let me go. So I'm going to bring this over here. So next week, just to keep plugging along, next week, obviously on Monday, we've got coding for Scratch, which is more for Year 7 primary school, that kind of stuff. So block coding, how to get your kids to do some real simple coding, but really effective coding. Final Cut on the following day on the 12th, which is all about video editing on Mac. Starting a free podcast, so getting your students to be able to make a podcast from home, which is cool. Then we have our intermediate class on the 14th, which I believe is next Thursday. Okay, so that's when I'll be talking about Pathfinder. We'll be talking about how we're going to start to create an actual product that we're going to laser cut. That's going to be the following Thursday. And then the final session for that is going to be on the wait, what am I looking at here? The 14th to the 5th, intermediate, yes, advanced, sorry, which is the following week. And then the final class on the 28th is actually cutting stuff with the laser cutter, I guess remotely. We'll see how we do that. So that is our week. So thank you very much. Have a good weekend. And I think that'll do it from me. So I'm just going to jump across here. And again, for those of you that may have had buffering issues or anything like that, this video will be up and ready for playback probably in about 10 minutes. I think YouTube do it pretty quickly. All right, so I'm going to end the stream. Thank you very much. Have a go at Illustrator, have a play, see how it goes. Hopefully you understood, I guess, the biggest difference between that and Photoshop is that whole vector design process and why we use it for creating content, because we can scale as much as we like, and why we use it for advanced manufacturing, because it uses those anchor points and paths for our machinery to follow, which is why it works.